State Athletic Department. So put your hands together for Coach Boss.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for not asking me to be in the lip sync thing. I think that gives us a whole new appreciation for what an actual wrecking ball does. Visual. So it's good to, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've been here, I think once a year for the past couple of years, Phil, and it's awesome to see a room full of people like yourselves. And so I just really, again, thank you for the opportunity and appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite guys in the Bible, and that's Joseph tonight. I think Joseph is the man, and it's one of my, like I said, my favorite guys in Scripture. I think there's an awful lot to learn from this guy's story, and just really, really cool stuff. There were, in his life, if you know the story of Joseph, we'll talk about it here in a second, but a lot of ups and a lot of downs, and I think there's a lot of similarities between Joseph and maybe my life, your life, kind of the ride that we're all on probably right now, especially you guys in the time of your life that you're at. But I want to tell you, before we talk about Joseph, I want to tell you about a former player of mine that I had when I was a head coach, my first year as a head coach at Eastern Michigan University. My first year as a head coach, our team started 0-17. We lost for a month straight, and I was starting to wonder whether this was actually going to be the career path that was going to be for me after losing 17 in a row. But we came up, we actually won a game, we won another game, came up here to Michigan State and won, and then our conference season started. We were playing Miami of Ohio. And we had a kid on our team named Mike Sasha. Mike was from Farmington Hills. And this guy was, an unbelievable kid, first of all. Very athletic kid, really physical, big, put together, and it never quite clicked for him. And, he was highly recruited out of high school. We got him at Eastern Michigan. I left for a couple of years to go work at Michigan, of all places. Came back to Eastern Michigan, so I finally got to coach Mike. But his career never really took off. He was injured all the time. He worked hard, but was always hurt. When I got to him, he had a stress fracture in his back, and so he's trying to heal from that. And so missed fall practice. We get going in the spring. He finally gets cleared to play in the spring, and he's so excited to start practicing. We're doing a drill in March or late February. Our season had just started. Just started a drill. He was so excited. He was the first guy in the drill. 5 minutes into practice, it was a bunting drill. So he squared around the bunt. The ball hit his back, bounced off his bat, hit him in the eye. So he fractured his orbital bone. So now he's out for another month. And the kid worked extremely hard, but just couldn't get it figured out. So we lose 17 games in a row. We come back after a month. Mike's finally healthy. We're playing at home for the first time. Mike is finally dressed. He's ready to go, but I didn't play him yet because he wasn't quite ready. He's healthy, but he hadn't seen any live pitching or any of that stuff. So we start the game, and it's freezing cold, as it always is in March. And it's a close game. It's back and forth. We're 2-17, I think, at the time. So we're trying to do everything just to win a game. So it's a back and forth game. We get to the bottom of the 9th inning. We don't score. We had an opportunity. So we go to extra innings. We get to the 11th inning. I'm completely out of players at this point. Because in baseball, once you take somebody out of the game, they're out. They can't come back in. Okay, so I've pinch hit, I've substituted, I've changed pitchers. I got nobody left, and I got a pitcher that's coming up in the bottom of the 11th inning to lead off. And most pitchers don't hit. You can talk to Caleb about that. And if you want to come watch practice and watch him swing, no offense, Caleb, you'll understand why pitchers don't hit. So I got a pitcher leading off the inning, and Mike's the only guy left on the bench. I'm like, Mike, grab a bat, get ready to go. You're leading off the bottom of the 11th inning. He's like, okay, coach. And so he got in the batter's box. He's leading off, or he leads off the inning, and the pitcher throws. The first pitch was a curveball, and it bounced about 6 feet in front of home plate. Mike swung at it. And at that point, I mean, I felt I was embarrassed for him. Yeah, I know he was embarrassed, and I felt terrible because my job as a coach is to put the guy in a position where he can succeed. And I thought I really did this guy a disservice because he's got no shot. So the next pitch is another curveball that this was a little closer, bounced on home plate. Mike swings again, misses. I'm like, all right, well, you know, I mean, we'll chalk this one up, lose the next guy up, right? So it's 0-2, and the pitcher threw a ball, then he threw another ball, and he threw another ball. So now the count's 3-2. I'm like, well, maybe Mike will walk, maybe the guy will hit him. Who knows? But you know, some way to get Mike on base because this is the winning run. So he threw the 3-2 pitch. He threw him a fastball. Why he didn't throw him another curveball is beyond all comprehension to me. But he threw him a fastball. Mike swung and he hit it. I'm like, oh my gosh, Mike hit it. That's unbelievable, you know. And I'm watching the ball, and I'm coaching third base, and the ball, the trajectory of the ball off the bat, you know, he hit it really hard, and the ball's going and it's high. And I'm like, wait a second. I mean, this could really go. And the ball kept going and going and going, and the ball, I get the chills thinking about it. The ball clears the left field fence, walk-off home run. I've never been more happy for a kid in my entire life, and we win the game. And that kind of springboards us with, you know, it's a long story. We end up winning the conference after starting the year 0-17, going on to an NCAA regional, which doesn't happen in Eastern Michigan very often. But that one swing, that one at bat by Mike, really kind of kick-started us, got everything going. And you look back at that moment, and Mike had worked hard. Mike had done everything that he needed to do. He battled through all kinds of adversity, and Mike was ready when we needed him. And I called on him, and Mike was ready. And I think that's one of the points of this story about Joseph. Because Joseph was a dude that he had a tough go. Really not fair if you think about what Joseph's life kind of ended up as. He was the favorite son of Jacob, guy with a really cool name, by the way, really cool first name, Jacob. But Jacob had two wives. Jacob married, well, he thought he was marrying the girl. He worked for 7 years and for this guy named Laban. He thought he was marrying the girl of his dreams, but Laban tricked him, and he married the other sister. And so Jacob finds this out. I don't know how he didn't find this out before at the wedding, but cultures back then a little bit different, I guess. So Jacob finds out the next day, wait a second, you tricked me, I married the other daughter. And the father-in-law says, well, you can marry the girl you want to marry, but you got to work for 7 more years. So he sucks it up and works for 7 more years and marries Rachel. So he's got 2 wives, and Rachel was his favorite, but Rachel couldn't have children. So he has 11 sons through his first wife, 7 years, married 7 years before he married his second wife, who was his favorite. Finally, Rachel becomes pregnant with Joseph. So he's got 10 kids, I think 10 boys, right? 10 boys, becomes pregnant, has Joseph. So Joseph's a favorite. How many people have little brothers or little sisters? Right, so how many people's little brothers or little sisters are the favorites? Yeah, see, I have 3 kids, and I guarantee you that my older 2 would tell you, I have an 18-year-old who's a freshman in college, I have a 16-year-old son who's a junior in high school, and I have a 10-year-old daughter who's at dance class right now. I am more than happy to be here, believe me. They will tell you that our 10-year-old is the favorite, and I will tell them I treat the 10-year-old the same way I treated you when you were 10, but they don't want to hear anything of it. All right, so Jacob's the favorite. And Jacob gets the coat of many colors. He's treated well, all the best stuff according to his brothers. The brothers hate him. I mean, literally hate him. I had a little sister who was 2 years younger than me. We butted heads a lot. I remember stomping on her foot one time and then begging her not to stop. Please stop crying because my dad is going to kill me. But I didn't hate my little sister. His brothers absolutely hated him to the point that they sold him. They were going to kill him. And one of the older brothers says, wait a minute, maybe we don't want to kill him. That might be a bad idea. Let's sell him to these guys. So they throw him in a pit, and these guys come along, and they say, well, all right, we got this guy here for you. We'll sell you our little brother to be your slave. And so that's what ended up happening. In Genesis, the story's in Genesis 37, starts in Genesis 37, and goes all the way to the end of the book. But it says, starting in like verse 3 or 4, verse 4, his brothers saw that his father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. And Joseph had a dream. So this is the other part of it. So you got a little brother who's the favorite, right? He's a snot-nosed little guy who has this dream and basically comes up to his other brothers and says, hey, listen, I had this dream last night, and you all are going to bow down to me someday. And that's basically the gist of the dream. And they said, oh, is that right? Really? But an important point to remember. So he said to them, please listen, this dream is which I have had. We were binding sheaves in the fold, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood, and behold, your sheaves gathered down around and bowed down to mine. And they said, oh, is that right? They said, now then, come and let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And we will say, a beast devoured him, then let's see what happens. Then basically, I got your dream, basically, right here. They concoct this plan, they throw him into the pit, and then they sit down and eat. They're like, well, I'm kind of hungry, let's eat dinner. So these guys hated him that much, it didn't really bother them to throw him in the pit and then sell him to this guy. So Joseph, his own brothers betray him, they sell him, and he's off to work as a slave for this Egyptian guy. Okay, so he's bought by a guy named Potiphar, okay, very rich guy in Egypt, and Joseph worked hard, and he worked hard and ended up having it pretty good. He became a trusted servant of this guy named Potiphar. He treated him great because he had a lot of money. And in Genesis 39, verse 2, it says, and the Lord was with Joseph, and so he became a successful man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Okay, so the Lord was with Joseph. I want you to remember that. Okay, so he goes to work for this guy, has it great. Potiphar's wife, the Bible says that Joseph was a very handsome guy, and Potiphar's wife noticed that. And so she was trying to get with Joseph on a couple different occasions, and it didn't happen. And Joseph said, nope, not doing it. To the point where the last time she grabbed him, and he basically spun out of his coat and ran away naked, and then she framed him. She said she went to whatever the police were like back then, and said basically, this guy tried to rape me, this happened, you need to throw him in jail. And so, obviously the husband was upset, they grabbed Joseph, throw him in jail. So, second thing that happens to him that he didn't really deserve. He got sold into slavery for being the favorite, something that maybe he didn't ask for, probably didn't handle it great, but it's neither here nor there. And then he works hard for this guy. His wife ends up framing him. He ends up getting thrown in jail. So he makes the best of the circumstances. Once again, he becomes friends with these two guys in jail that worked for Pharaoh. And so here he goes. These two guys have another dream. Have a dream. Joseph interprets the dream. And long story short, they both get let out of jail. One guy goes back into Pharaoh's inner circle, I guess. And Joseph, before the guy leaves, says, hey, listen, I interpret this dream for you. I'm basically getting you out of here. You got to remember me when you leave. The guy says, okay, no problem. Thanks, man. So he gets let out. The other guy gets let out. The other guy gets killed. The guy that's supposed to remember Joseph completely forgets about him. Number 3, right? So he did what he was supposed to do. He was ready. He was there. Guy forgot about him. Completely forgot about him. Then Pharaoh has a dream. So you can kind of see how it all starts to come together. Right? He's got these connections. He gets thrown in jail. He's got connections in jail. They get out. Pharaoh has a dream. Nobody can interpret Pharaoh's dream. Pharaoh's the king. Nobody can interpret the dream. Finally, this guy that was in jail with Joseph says, hey, wait a second, I remember this guy in jail interpreted my dream. Let me go grab him. So they grab Joseph, bring him in front of the king or in front of Pharaoh, and say, here's the deal. This is what the dream is. What does this mean? And Joseph basically says, listen, there's going to be a big famine. You're going to have 7 years of really good, and then 7 years where really bad. And it's not going to rain. There's going to be a big famine, and this is what's going to happen. And again, another long story short, Joseph ends up working for Pharaoh. He does such a good job that Pharaoh puts him in charge of the entire country. So you got a guy that gets thrown in jail, or thrown into a pit, taken to work as a slave, thrown in jail. 7 years later, the guy's running the entire country of Egypt, and there are hard times. There's a big famine going on, nobody's got any food, but because Joseph was wise and planned and knew what he was doing and trusted in God and the way that he was being led, God put him in a position of leadership, which, at that point, everybody loves Joseph, but everybody needs food, including his family with his brothers. And one day, the brothers show up, and they don't recognize him. Joseph probably speaks several different languages, I would guess, at this point, and the brothers show up, and they're like, hey, we need some food, can you help us? And at that point, in my mind, Joseph's got a decision to make. Do I get revenge on these guys, or do I help them out? He probably has a little bit of fun with them along the way, sends them back, keeps one of the guys, puts some stuff in their bags, for me, reading the story, it seems like he's messing with them a little bit. But he doesn't know what to do, whether to get revenge, not get revenge. However, Joseph recognizes, I think, that his circumstances, everything that happened to him prior to that, okay, has put him in this position right now. And everything that happened to him leading up to the position that he was at right now, and the opportunity that he had to help a lot of people, to save a lot of people's lives, and that was the stance that he took on his position. So, chapter 50 in Genesis, verse 20, I think is one that really summarizes the entire story of Joseph. And I think it's an awesome verse. And it essentially says, what you had intended for bad, God had intended for good. It says, and as for you, you meant evil against me. He's talking to his brothers. But God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. Essentially saying, listen, I forgive you, first of all. Second of all, had you not sold me into slavery, I wouldn't have been in this position. I wouldn't have gotten thrown in jail. I wouldn't have gotten out of jail and put in this position. And then a lot of people would have died as a result. So essentially, you go back, and the turning point for Joseph when his brothers threw him in the pit and sold him into slavery. So I can look back at my life, okay, and I want to look back at your own kind of story, all right, and how you got here, okay, because we're all here for a reason. Okay, you are here tonight. You're in that chair for you're sitting next to whoever you're sitting next to tonight for a very specific reason. I really believe that. And I look back at my life, and I can tell you that I'm here because I made a decision a number of years ago, really, to transfer schools. I went to a small private school. They didn't have a baseball team. I wanted to go play baseball at a large school, play for my dad, who was a coach. Some of you know my dad. If you don't, take his class, Theory of Baseball. Pretty good class. Shameless plug for my old man. But I made that decision that I wanted to go play for my dad, and that kickstarted things. Had I not done that, I wouldn't have played high school baseball, which means I wouldn't have played college baseball, which means I wouldn't have coached baseball, which means I wouldn't eventually get to where I am, right now. So think about your own life. Think about the decisions that you made, okay, however long ago, or think about the moments that have happened. Maybe they're good, maybe they're not. But what led you to where you're at right now? Okay, maybe it was a coach coming to see you play. Maybe somebody got hurt, gave you an opportunity to play right away. Maybe you got cut from a team and ended up on a different team that gave you an opportunity to play. I don't know, everybody's situation is different. But I think when you look back at how our lives play out, and it's easy to look back, what got me here at this moment, at this time, and it's awesome to see how God works. And you see how God works in Joseph's life. It's unbelievable the work that he did in Joseph's life. Genesis 45, verses 7 and 8, kind of speak to that. For me, it says, and God sent me before you to preserve you for a remnant, in the earth, and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Now therefore, it was not you who sent me, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and the lord of his household and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Okay, so he's saying that at that point, yeah, you guys might have done that to me, but God put me in this position for a reason. Okay, and everybody here, like I said, everybody here is here tonight, tomorrow at practice, in the Smith Center, whatever. You're there for a reason. So, some takeaways I think that we can use from this story. And if you get an opportunity later, we kind of briefly summarize the story, but if you get a chance to read it, starting in Genesis 37 through the end of the book, 37 through 50, absolutely awesome story about Joseph and how he dealt with those circumstances. Because we all have tough circumstances, okay? We all have tough circumstances. I mean, some have it, maybe tougher than others, but your circumstances are your circumstances and they're nobody else's, okay? Somebody might look at some of the things that I maybe have gone through and say, well, that's a piece of cake, that's nothing, whatever, I got it worse. None of that stuff matters, okay? I have a beautiful wife, I have 3 kids, okay, but I will tell you, marriage is not easy. And raising kids is not easy at all. And there are a lot of things that might look like it's really great on the outside, but your circumstances are your circumstances, and you got to deal with them. And you got to deal with them in a way that I think you looked at Joseph and how he dealt with his circumstances. Some things I think you can take away. God uses circumstances that maybe you don't like, all right, for his glory. Okay, and I think the perspective that we take on our circumstances really can help define the outcome. Okay, again, Genesis 50 verse 20. What you used for evil, God used for good. Okay, again, practice. Think about practice. If you didn't go to practice every day, you're not going to be any good. Okay, how many people like to practice? I hated practicing. Okay, that's why I probably wasn't a very good player. Right? That's why I'm a coach. Those who can coach or teach, right? I hated practice. Okay, practice. I mean, the games are the fun stuff, right? That's where it's all. That's where it all comes together. But obviously, if you don't practice, okay, then you're no good at the game. Okay, you don't get a chance to play. Okay. However, interesting thing about Joseph. Joseph was patient. Number one. Okay, he was very patient. Think about everything that he had gone through. And I don't know off the top of my head how many years that had all taken place and how many years he was in jail and how many years he was in slavery. I don't have any idea. But when things go wrong, what do we want to do? We want to fix it. And we want it over and we want it to be done right now. And Joseph was patient. He says, God is in control. The Lord was with Joseph. Okay? In my translation, the Lord was with Joseph shows up at least 4 times in Genesis chapter 39. Okay, so hanging out with Uncle Phil over here for a while, learned about a little bit how to read Scripture. And when something is repeated, that becomes pretty important. Okay, and that is repeated in there many, many times. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. So if the Lord was with Joseph, and it's repeated that amount of times, okay, then I'm led to believe that Joseph was with the Lord also. Okay, because you can't, if the Lord is with Joseph and Joseph's not with the Lord, it doesn't work that way. All right, it doesn't work that way. It's like my entire freshman year of high school. Right, I wanted to be with that girl, but she didn't want to be with me. Right, so. So it's not how it works, okay? The Lord was with Joseph. However, Joseph was with the Lord, okay? And I think that's extremely important to remember. Number 2, we can't handle it, okay, unless we rely on God, all right? Can't handle what we're going through unless we rely on God, all right? And sometimes that seems a little bit obvious, and sometimes it's not, because everybody here has some type of area of temptation. Everybody here. Okay? Everybody walking the face of the earth. Okay? Because we have those areas of temptation, okay, the devil knows what those are. Alright? There's no question. And often it comes feeling pretty good about yourself. I go back to my first year as a head coach. I felt pretty good about myself being a head coach. As young as I was and ready to take on the world, and then I lost 17 games we lost 17 games in a row. And all of a sudden, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Okay? So often that temptation comes when we're feeling pretty good about ourselves. Joseph runs from temptation. He runs from it. Potiphar's wife comes after him, he literally ran from temptation. I think that's what we're called to do. And that's not easy, okay? Especially in the environment that you're in right now, at a big place like Michigan State, it's not easy to turn and run, okay? But sometimes you got to turn and run, and don't put yourself in that situation. We can't handle it, okay, unless you rely on God. Okay, the third thing, I think, be prepared, and you never know how God's going to use you. Okay, Mike, my guy Mike was prepared. Okay, even though I didn't realize it, and even though it didn't look like it, this guy was ready, and he ended up helping our ball club. Okay, so how are we prepared? Okay, how do we get prepared? I think number one, I think we got to be in the Word, and it's not easy. I think you got to pick up a Bible and open it up and read it. All right, and that's not easy. Okay, again, I got 3 kids, 2 kids at home right now. It's tough sometimes to find time in the day to pick up my Bible and read it. All right, but if you have a reading plan, if you have, just open it up and start reading. My guess is if you open that book up, okay, without a real plan, okay, you're going to come to a chapter that something's going to hit home. All right, because that's how it works. Okay, but if you don't know, if you're not familiar with it, pick up a Bible, open it up, and start reading it. In Psalms it says, "Be still, okay, and know that I am God." Psalm 46:10. Okay, the beginning of that chapter in Psalm 46 talks about how great God is, and all the awesome stuff that He does, and all the awesome things that He allows us to experience. And then in the middle of the chapter it says, "But stop, be still, take a breath." Right? Everything goes so fast. Be still and know that I am God, is what He says. And if you really think about that, how awesome is that? To know that everything here, everything around us, everything that's happened, everything that He's created, you talk about, the mountains and the, different, all these different things in all over the world that you can see, all the places that you can go, all the things that you've experienced, all the things that have led you to be here right now, okay? That's all orchestrated by God. And how cool is that to know that, wait a second, just take a step back, calm yourself down, be still, and know that He is God, okay? And I think that's how we can prepare. Also faith, okay? Faith in Hebrews talks about being sure of what you hope for and being certain of what you do not see. Hebrews 11 verse 1. Okay? Faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of the things that you can't see. All right? Yeah, I tried to buy a car today for my 16-year-old son, and I don't know anything about cars. Right? I had faith that this car was going to be the car. It wasn't the car. Right? So maybe that's a bad example of what faith is. But I don't know how my car works, but I tell you, I'm gonna get in that thing tonight. I'm gonna push the button. The car is gonna start, and it's gonna drive me home. Right? I don't know. I have any idea how that stuff happens. Okay, but it does, and I have faith that happens. Okay, but faith is being sure of what you hope for and being certain of what you cannot see. Okay, and understanding what the big picture is with God and how that works in your life. And I think the last thing we have to do to be ready is to forgive. And you think about Joseph and his situation. How easy would it have been for him to get revenge on his brothers? Right? Well, wait a second. You guys sold me into slavery, and now you come and want me to take care of you? And what did he do? He opened his arms up to his brothers and welcomed them back in. The entire family moves down to Egypt. He takes care of them basically for the rest of their lives because he forgave them for what they did. And why did he forgive them? Because he was with God, or God was with him, and he was with God. The Lord's Prayer tells us to forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. All right? And so we're instructed to do that in the Bible. Okay? The last thing, I think the most important probably takeaway in this whole story is how that story is parallel to what Christ did for us. You think about all the injustices that Joseph had encountered, thrown in jail, sold into slavery, everything that he did, compare that to what Christ had to endure for us. Okay, something that he didn't deserve. He walked the face of the earth as a perfect man. Okay, they nailed him to a cross, okay, for us, for you and for me, and he bore every sin that I've committed, that you've committed, through the history of time. All all that was placed on his back. And he died. And he died for you, and he died for me, and he didn't have to do that. Okay? And I certainly am glad that he did, without question. Okay? But you talk about an injustice, all right? That was an injustice. What happened to Christ was an injustice. However, God turned that, okay, by sending his son down for us, all right? Just like Joseph ended up in that position to save thousands of people, okay, or millions of people at that time. Okay, God sends his son for us to save all of us for the rest of eternity. I think it's a really, really powerful message. So if you get an opportunity, take a look at a little bit more in depth at the story of Joseph. But I think, again, understand that your circumstances are put there by God. You know, you hear the question a lot, well, why does God do bad things to good people? Okay, well, God doesn't do bad things, first of all. But I think he allows some things to happen, okay, in order to mold us, in order to shape us, okay, in order to use it for good. And I think our perspective on that has to be just that. Well, God, what are you doing right now, and how do you plan on using me? And if you pray about how do you plan on using me, you better get ready. Okay, because he's going to use you in ways that you have no idea. Okay, I think I'm a pretty good example of that. I've been fortunate to go with Phil all over the world and do a lot of different, unbelievable things. And I prayed a number of years ago, 15 years ago probably. All right, what are you doing? I was making no money as an assistant coach at Eastern Michigan, and I said, what are we doing here? I've been here for 7 years and just kind of grinding. And, all of a sudden, things really started to take off. So I've been very blessed. Can't handle it unless we look to God, okay? The Lord was with Joseph, all right? So if we don't have that assurance, then it's going to be really, really difficult. Third, be prepared, okay? Again, be ready to go. And then just understand, okay, what happened to Joseph parallels what happened to Christ. Okay, what happened to Christ, okay, for you and me, means we get eternity in paradise, which is going to be unbelievably awesome. So, thank you again for having me. I appreciate it. Read that story.